Tonight on CFTK-TV News, we'll hear from Nathan Cullen after his shocking election loss. Some more travel options have become available in Terrace, and David Eby spoke publicly for the first time in a few days.
Northwest BC's only television news team. We are CFTK-TV News.
Good evening, I'm Cale Maslin, and here's what's making the news in the Northwest and beyond for today. We begin with word from the Tela RCMP and what went on with them during the first half or so of October as written in their weekly update. One reported incident saw some officers conducting traffic enforcement in a school zone notice a Ford Mustang traveling in the area quite quickly, and once the vehicle was pulled over, they learned it was traveling around 70 kilometers an hour through two school zones. The driver did not have a valid BC driver's license either, so their ticket amount shot up to over $500. Another incident in the report noted that other officers pulled over a vehicle as part of a traffic stop, and after noticing some drug paraphernalia inside of it, the driver was arrested, and upon further searching, they found more items consistent with drug trafficking, which has led to a CDSA investigation being started up. In the later part of last night, a plane was required to make an emergency landing directly on Highway 16 not too far away from Telquah. The need for this emergency landing was initially received by the Smithers RCMP, notifying them that a Cessna plane was dealing with some mechanical issues and needed to get on the ground quick. The plane was able to make the landing without any further problems, and afterwards, an assessment was conducted by the Ministry of Transportation, Highways, and Infrastructure. They found that there were not any injuries caused by the incident, nor was any nearby property damaged either. However, Transport Canada is set to conduct its own investigation, so they can presumably find out what problems led to the plane having to make said sudden landing. In Terrace, commuters who don't want to use cars when traveling in between the bench and downtown will now have alternate ways to do so. CFTK's Damian Smith has more.
Well, citizens in Terrace between the bench and downtown will now have better access with two new trails being built. The city of Terrace announced yesterday that the new stairs made from wood and stone will be built on the Pump House Trail, as well as a softer and more consistent terrain is being put on the Viewpoint Trail. Now, originally put under construction back in the middle of July, it was reported by Mayor Sean Bouillatosh at the time that construction would be completed sometime in October. And now finished, the new trails will now give a more comfortable trek, whether going up or down. And the Viewpoint Trail now has a softer terrain, while the more steep Pump House Trail sees rows of stairs made for a more consistent walk, as this trail is known to be quite steep for walkers. Now, this trail was actually proposed back in 2009, where eventually it took 13 years for the grant to be officially awarded to the city of Terrace. And here we are 2 years later with two new trails being built. From CFTK, I'm Damian Smith.
As we get set to part with a long-time, well-known politician in the Northwest, former MP and now former MLA Nathan Cullen said that he's both disappointed and surprised with the outcome of the election. Here's CFTK's Jaylee Matthews with more word on what he had to say.
Nathan Cullen says his election loss wasn't for lack of trying, saying that of the 7 elections he's been in, he believes this campaign was one of the best ones he's run in terms of reach and volunteers. Cullen says, however, that there was obviously a mood for change.
There was a palpable pent-up frustration over some things. And I also think, to be fair, there was a lot of anger, right? And we saw that early on. Our signs were just getting destroyed like never before. We had that horrible episode with a sign on the highway where someone put up a hanging noose of me. And I talked to a lot of folks in the last couple of days, particularly in First Nations communities, that felt almost intimidated to vote. And that worries me a little bit. Like online, oh my gosh, like the rhetoric was violent sometimes. Not just like, we don't like your government, or Nathan, we don't like you. It was the next level. And I think we should really pay attention to that. And all parties should push away from that.
Cullen says this trend towards violence will have consequences.
One is, who's going to run for office? Second, what kind of government are you going to get? If it's just if it's that kind of rage or the meanness, like I don't mind debate. I don't mind people disagreeing even really strongly. I think that's healthy. It's when it crosses over into that other place. I think it's worthwhile, all of us, whatever your political persuasion, of pushing back and calming things down and not making everything so personal.
For CFTK News, I'm Jaylene Matthews.
Coming up next, a search is taking place to find a man that is believed to have been swept away by a river. Welcome back. As we await the final outcome of the provincial election, the current premier, for the time being at least, David Eby, was heard from for the first time since Saturday night. CTV's Rob Buffum was able to disclose how Eby's demeanor reflected the political setback his party suffered, regardless of if he wins or not.
A visibly humbled David Eby held his first news conference since election night when his party was reduced by multiple seats, including 5 cabinet ministers.
British Columbians sent me a strong message that we need to do better. I feel like in the last 72 hours, I've learned as much about this job as I have in the previous 2 years.
With at least 2 recounts needed, the results of the election won't be confirmed until this weekend at the earliest. But if they hold, Eby has a 1-seat lead and needs the help of the 2 newly elected Greens to cobble together a minority government.
I think British Columbians want us to get to work right away on the issues that they're concerned about. That's certainly the message that I took.
He wouldn't confirm the legislature would sit this fall, noting the Greens have said their 2 newbie MLAs want some time before they start negotiating. When pressed how easy any such deal could be, given attacks in the campaign, he said this.
You know, in the mirror, the Greens were encouraging people to reject the NDP and vote for the Greens. That's how election campaigns go.
One such Green who was defeated, party leader Sonia Furstenau, who announced today she's staying on, adding, "They need our next government to leave the negativity and toxicity of the campaign behind, get down to work, and start delivering for them. I am prepared to provide guidance and counsel as our party and our province enter this new chapter." Of course, this scenario is much like 2017 when the NDP under John Horgan convinced the Greens under Andrew Weaver to sign a formal deal, giving them the support they needed to govern. Today, Weaver says these new Greens shouldn't sign a formal deal, at least not right away.
It is going to be a bit of a shock for the 2 Greens because they have no experience in the legislature and they're going to be jumping in to the deep end 2 feet in.
Meanwhile, the Conservatives' John Rustad says he aims to topple any NDP government ASAP and would court the Greens himself to form government, meaning 2 first-time MLAs will be the most popular ones here whenever the legislature returns.
The death toll from the weekend's atmospheric rivers could climb to as many as 5 people. A desperate search is underway for a Coquitlam man believed to have been swept away in a fast-moving river. The man's daughter spoke with CTV News, and she's holding out hope that her father will be found alive. CTV's Kevin Chirac has more.
Jessica Belding calls for her dad, searching for any signs of hope.
I'm an avid hiker and I know how the rivers work, and he could be anywhere on the river. So we've just been searching the whole thing.
59-year-old Robert Belding was helping his brother deal with flooding issues at his home on Sunday and decided to walk his brother's dog in Gillette Park around 5 p.m. He never returned.
And the police found the dog later soaking wet quite a ways away, so they assumed that they fell in the river together.
The current here at the Coquitlam River is moving dangerously fast, and the recent heavy rainfall has only made things worse. There's also the threat of debris, including rocks, logs, and the water is also frigid cold.
The danger and the hazards associated with being around that water is significant. Just slips and trips and falls along the shoreline and ending up in that water can sweep you away.
Crews have searched 2 days straight, covering 50 kilometers Tuesday alone. RCMP also deploying eyes in the sky.
The sides of the river are fairly brushy and hard to get to see the shoreline. So we've had the boat in the water through the deeper water and without any efforts of success at this point.
Belding's disappearance adding to a devastating week in the area. On Saturday, local teacher Sonia McIntyre was killed after a mudslide destroyed her Coquitlam home. The Tri-Cities saw more than 250 millimeters of rain over the weekend. Belding's daughter trying to stay positive.
It's just hard. It doesn't feel real, Obviously, everyone's pretty distraught. I think that everyone can attest to that, so yeah.
Crews plan to be back on the Coquitlam River and its banks Wednesday, marking day 3 in the search for Robert Belding.
At this point, all of our team members are hopeful of finding him in good condition.
Kevin Chirac, CTV News, Coquitlam.
We are learning more about the 2 men who died on Vancouver Island when Bamfield Road flooded in this past weekend's torrential rain. Now they've been remembered by a community that knew them well. CTV's Adam McMillan reports.
Up in Bamfield, oh my gosh, it's barbecues and suppers and come over for the football game.
Bob Beckett has a home in the community where everyone knows everyone, and today they're mourning 2 of their own. The men who died last weekend when their trucks were swept away by floodwaters on Bamfield Road are being identified as Bob Baden and Ken Duncan.
Condolences on behalf of my family to both families and their loss and to the loss that the community is feeling as well.
Beckett represents Bamfield for the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District. He and Baden were friends.
Bob was an amazing, not only a very successful business person, but someone who gave his heart and soul to the community.
Baden co-founded the local building supply shop, while Duncan worked for nearby Huayet First Nations group of businesses.
As our property manager, a good guy, well-known, well-liked, very effective in his job.
Duncan's body was recovered over the weekend, and today search and rescue are coordinating the recovery of Baden's body now that the river's water level has fallen.
The sense is that I'm getting from residents that have called me, they're struggling.
He says the province and regional district are looking into providing grief counseling.
And I don't know that anyone knows at this point in time if things could have been different, if the outcomes could have been different. Should the road have been closed? Could there have been additional improvements to the road?
He says an investigation is required to answer those questions.
Anytime a life is lost due to natural disaster or there's significant property damage, we always go back and do a review. What did we learn? How can we do things better?
The regional district says a forestry crew is working on affected sections of the road, which is now drivable with caution. Anna McMillan, CTV News.
Turning to tonight's weather, the north coast is set to see a few showers with the low at 6 degrees. The Terrace-Kitimat area should get a few showers as well, with the low instead being at 2 degrees. And the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District will likely be home to a chance of rain or flurries, while their low sits at -4 degrees. On the north coast, their upcoming week will consist entirely of rainy and cloudy days, with the high shifting from 10 to 7 degrees. In the Terrace-Kitimat area, the week for them will deal with lots of rainy days as well, and the high will bounce between 5 and 7 degrees. And in the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District, the next week or so may see a little bit of sun to start before going to exclusively rain like the other areas, while their high moves between 4 and 8 degrees. Checking out the highways now, visit Drive BC for the latest and up-to-date conditions, and as always, drive safe out there. On Highway 16, there is a special event planned in the form of a planned road closure, ditching, slippery sections, maintenance, utility work, and construction work. Highway 118 has some roadside brushing. Highway 37 has some slippery sections, roadside brushing, and utility work. 37A has slippery sections too, some construction work and slippery sections on the Nishka Highway, and the Telegraph Creek Road has slippery sections as well. And this is what the roads were looking like this afternoon around the region from the view of the province's highway cams. Still to come, we look at the aftermath of a brutal apartment fire. Welcome back. There is a movement within the Liberal Party that wants Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to step aside, and soon some Liberal MPs are expected to confront him behind closed doors and ask him to resign. Yet, as CTV's Rachel Aiello reports, several federal ministers came to his defense.
A day before he's expected to face calls from within his caucus to resign, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he doesn't think his leadership is in danger, and several senior Liberal ministers today say they still have his back.
I absolutely support the Prime Minister.
Yes, I support the Prime Minister. On their way into an unusually long cabinet meeting, ministers welcome the coming caucus-wide conversation, where an evolving number of Liberal MPs are expected to confront Trudeau with their concerns.
We often have different perspectives.
I'm comfortable with difficult conversations. Others said their colleagues should stay focused on Canadians and the Conservative opponent that they have been trailing in the polls for more than a year.
Any minute spent on this garbage is a minute that's not spent on Pierre Poilievre.
Uncertainty remains about what will unfold behind closed doors tomorrow, with many Liberals saying that what happens in caucus should stay there. Today, a former Conservative leader who faced an internal revolt said it's time for Trudeau to step down or call an election.
I think he is a distraction for the national debate, for his own caucus.
The Liberal caucus drama comes as the House of Commons is still at a standstill, and as Trudeau prepares for another cabinet shuffle.
The reality is he can't administer the government because he's too busy fighting for his job.
All of this is keeping speculation alive that the Prime Minister could prorogue, with pollsters saying it would take a massive change to turn Liberal fortunes around.
A Liberal House divided cannot win an election, period, full stop.
The Prime Minister has been facing calls to step aside for months, but this latest push is the most direct pressure, as it's coming from Liberals elected under him. Through it all, Trudeau has been adamant that he intends to stay. Rachel Aiello, CTV News, Ottawa.
Now to the inside of what's left of an apartment in a downtown high-rise that erupted in flames. 3 units were totally gutted in the Alberti Street building. Residents were allowed back inside to survey the damage as fire investigators begin the difficult task of determining the cause. CTV's Shannon Patterson has more.
This is a room completely destroyed, and then all of these windows are all gone.
This is what's left of Cole McLeod's downtown Vancouver apartment. When he was allowed to survey the damage in daylight, he was speechless.
It was surreal. Can't really put into words. All the furniture, desks gone. Beds, TVs, essentially everything is rubble.
McLeod and his roommate were in their 21st floor rental Monday afternoon when the fire alarm went off and they smelled smoke.
We went into the master bedroom and then there was a bunch of smoke blowing from the unit below, and then that's when we realized it's a real problem. And by the time we were going down the stairs, because the elevators were locked, all the firemen were already on the way up.
When McLeod got down to street level and looked up at his building, he saw debris raining down from a fire that had engulfed several apartments, including his.
It was pretty scary stuff.
We had material coming off, hitting our vehicle, and embers coming off as well, while there were still aluminum pieces, glass pieces that were coming off right onto Nicholas Street.
Complicating firefighting efforts, the building was constructed the year before sprinklers were required in downtown high-rises.
We were bringing up all of our equipment 20 floors up and then fighting a fire. And at that fire floor, the crews that were there were going through multiple cylinders of air because we need to bring our own air to there.
Crews managed to douse the flames using hose hookups in the stairwells. While the cause remains undetermined,
we had some reports too of people thinking that there was a meth lab involved. There is no meth lab.
McLeod's apartment was one of 3 completely destroyed in the fire.
I did manage to grab my passport, thankfully. It's not ash, so that's a silver lining.
He's also grateful he has renter's insurance and family he can stay with while he looks for a new place to live.
Belongings can be replaced. I'm glad everyone's safe, and that's what matters.
Shannon Patterson, CTV News, Vancouver.
And now we turn our attention to the stock markets. The Canadian dollar is down 9/100ths of a cent. The price of gold is down $30.40. Oil is down 97 cents, natural gas is up 3 cents, aluminum is up $26. In Toronto, the TSX is down 143.08 points. The Venture Index is down 14.59. In New York, the Dow Jones is down 409.94, and Nasdaq is down 296.48. Still ahead, a city councilor is looking at a certain party to help with the housing crisis. Welcome back. Religious organizations own a lot of valuable land in Vancouver, and a city councilor sees enormous potential there. She is hoping more faith groups will develop their lands to help solve the housing crisis. CTV's Abigail Turner explains.
Love thy neighbor. A message Rebecca Bly is hoping will hit home for religious groups in Vancouver.
I think that what's unique about faith-based groups is that they have land holdings, very valuable land holdings, but also a sort of mandate by their congregations to do social good.
It's part of the reason she's put forward a motion to explore how the city could support religious groups in redeveloping their properties, many which are aging quickly, she says.
The unique nature of the fact that these faith-based groups are often sitting on land that is actually tax-free, so church land does not pay property tax, generally are not going to have a mortgage on their land.
But redevelopment wouldn't just apply to churches, community spaces as well, such as soup kitchens.
Those types of properties that we own, they tend to be low rise, maybe 1, 2, 3 stories tops. So in specific areas, especially ones that are very close to transit, there's space to go vertical.
It's something that's already being done at First United Church on East Hastings.
We tore down our church and we're redeveloping our space into 11 stories, 7 floors of Indigenous social housing and 4 floors of social services.
She says in principle the idea is great, as long as it includes one major piece of the puzzle.
Any conversation about land, certainly land used by the church and the redevelopment of it, must have Indigenous voices at the table.
The redevelopment would have a focus on affordable housing. The motion will be presented Wednesday. Abigail Turner, CTV News, Vancouver.
Police on Vancouver Island say 3 people have been charged with first-degree murder in the overdose death of a woman from the Nanaimo. A statement from BC's Combined Forces Special Enforcement Unit says their team on Vancouver Island began investigating in August 2023 after obtaining information that led them to believe the woman's death was suspicious. The investigation led to the identification of 3 suspects, 2 men and 1 woman, all from nearby Duncan and ranging in age from 41 to 59 years old. The BC Prosecution Service has approved first-degree murder charges against all 3, and the Special Enforcement Unit says 2 of the accused have been arrested while police are searching for one of the men. Penticton RCMP say that they've notified BC's police watchdog after a confrontation that led to a man's death and left an officer with non-life-threatening injuries. The Mounties say they received multiple 911 calls reporting a man acting erratically and allegedly waving a knife in the residential area. They say an interaction occurred between the man and an officer, leading to the officer firing their duty pistol. RCMP say the man was taken to hospital, but he later died, and the Independent Investigations Office is now looking at police actions. That is all of our news for now. From all of us here at CFTK-TV News, I'm Cal Maslin, and thank you for watching. We will see you next time.